who is going to talk about a selection of map impact data. So I'm just going to give you control. Excellent. There you go, Steve. You should have it.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Keir-Hain, Chief Commercial Officer at Map Impact. I'm just going to spend the next 10 minutes taking a very quick overview on our our products. Whoops, why have I come out of that?
You all right? Yeah, there you go. Give control.
I just want the next slide. Can you?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay. Somehow I've lost control of the order of that. So we're a relatively new business, founded in 2023. We've got a few different hubs: Bristol, London, Glasgow. We've got a mix of sort of spatial data, ecological expertise, and also uniquely, perhaps for the type of business, quite a lot of finance and financial services. On the right there, that's some of the organisations that we've been working with. And a mix there, local authorities. We've got some commercial customers there, conveyancing businesses that produce environmental search reports. But I'll give you a flavour of the products that we are now actually taking into the marketplace. So, Ian,
yeah,
I'm looking to you to.
That's fine.
Brilliant. So this is how we put our solutions to the market. We take inputs, so we use a lot of satellite imagery to get the sufficiently granular resolution, and we combine that with what we call ground truthing. So we put those things together, those two elements, and we also apply a lot of what we would say are bespoke analytics. We use a lot of AI combined with machine learning to come out with the sort of optimum indices that we can infer sort of logic from. We create nationwide data sets. That is sort of some of the method is patented. It's going through patent application, but it's consistent. So from one end of the country to the other, the method is entirely consistent at 50-meter resolution. So that is quite unique at the moment in terms of that level of sort of resolution. And then obviously we provide data as a service. So Ian, please. We've got 4 foundation products. The unique edge is that our first one, Biodiversity View, is an assessment of land cover and habitat condition right across the nation at 50-meter intervals. Heat View is high resolution for heat stress, so susceptibility to heat stress. Drought View being susceptibility to water stress and drought risk. And Wildfire View, as it speaks for itself, is about wildfire susceptibility at locational level. Ian. If I firstly talk about Biodiversity View, so we do away with that slide. We've got national coverage, as I said before. Importantly, the outputs that we have align to the DEFRA metric calculator, so they are produced to be enshrined as part of that legislative process. We talk about regional context, so we use that to benchmark one area against another within its region, but we can then drill down to specific sites, which obviously gives you that sort of granular sort of view of that. Thanks, Ian. In terms of reporting, we can produce the data onto dashboards, into discrete reports, pretty flexible really, and we sort of work with platform providers, software providers, or we can produce static PDF reports if the demand requests those. Thanks, Ian. Looking at Wildfire View, so again, a national data set. We run this on a 3-year rolling temporal window. That's because if you get an outlier year, it's in sort of not the right thing just to focus on 1 year in isolation. So we do it on a continued 3-year rolling window. 15 different features following sort of thematic groups there. So in the case of wildfire, it varies from understanding, what the landscape is, the meteorological conditions, right the way down to understanding areas of interest where people gather. Most of the wildfires in the UK are actually down to human involvement, intervention. So part of our data sort of looks at where wildfires occur, where they might occur, because there are car parks, lay-bys, walks, mountain biking, camping, that sort of thing. Main sources, lots of satellite-based imagery there and indices from that, again underscored by our biodiversity view. It's our understanding of land cover and the condition that it's in or not in, which is a major contribution to wildfire risk. Ian. Won't go over this in detail, but there's a definition there of what is a wildfire, how we ascribe that. Lots of incidents of this year in the UK, record year. We now have a wildfire season. So on the low score, we're talking here about a very low likelihood of a wildfire in a certain area, going right the way through to a high score, where the likelihood is elevated and the potential for severity is substantial. In the past, we didn't worry so much about wildfire, but it's now a major concern, and we're seeing regulators like the Prudential Regulation Authority telling insurers and banks that they need to now sort of manage this risk and understand it and assess it going forward. In terms of drought view, again, the same sort of approach to that, a 3-year temporal window, very specific thematic groups here. So again, looking at things like land surface temperature, precipitation, it's obviously extremely important here, but also the vegetation, soil conditions, land management and condition, again, plays a very important part here. Also drought severity, vegetation, health indices. The whole thing around water stress here is important. What happens when the supply of water in rivers, etc., starts to go low? What impact does that have? We're expecting to see, again, some record claims going forward this autumn into winter on subsidence because of the clay shrink swell background. Sources, again, a lot of satellite-based imagery here, but then also understanding soil condition, so data sources from that, and again underpinned by our biodiversity view product. Same sort of approach here, from low going up to very high. In particular, we speak to physical climate change risk here because this is a major concern. It's about degrading asset value. That's obviously of concern to lenders against these assets or insurers against the assets. And so this understanding of forward looking as well. So all of these data sets are actually measured with RCPs that look ahead at 5, 30 and 50-year forward projections here. Ian, please. Heat view. So this is the final one of our 4. Again, the 3-year rolling sort of window. This one's an interesting one because I think it very much plays to housing associations. So if we look at the thematic group here, you can see from this, it's land surface temperature, which is important. The thing about heat stresses, though, we're also able to capture nighttime temperature. And when we're talking about things like urban heat island effect, it's that locked in temperature, especially at nighttime, that causes real problems for people who have underlying respiratory illnesses or health conditions. That temperature is really dangerous. Resolution Foundation this year talks about 1 million children in inner London or in London area being at risk from heat. Some urban properties this year were uninhabitable for months of the summer season. We had 4 extreme heat events in 2025, a record year. What we also, though, here build into consideration is where there is green areas that mitigate. There's a huge cooling factor from greening. Again, main sources, so satellite imagery here, day-nighttime imagery series, we're picking up all of these sort of understanding of how bad the locked-in nighttime temperature is in addition to the daytime temperature. And again, understanding the land cover. Inner cities where it's all concrete, that acts like a sponge in terms of trapping in and storing heat. Thank you, Ian. Again, our scoring for HeatView. Importantly here, we're trying to think, well, it's a nice summer, it's just very hot, it's very pleasant. Actually, year on year, it degrades property as well. A lot of the building fabrics here are not built with or to be conditioned to these extreme temperatures. So that is of concern again to insurers, to lenders, and it should be to housing associations as well, especially where there are vulnerable residents. Thanks, Ian. So our case study on that for heat stress was Liv. They were the first user of our HeatView outputs. So on this, we took a sort of an assessment of their whole housing stock. This was over a year ago now. They wanted it done by neighbourhood area into ward level, although they've got the underlying data per sort of building type. So they wanted a RAG output as well, which is how we delivered it. We can deliver the outputs in a variety of ways. It can be done on a CSV, which is what the financial services companies want, or it can be highly visual onto a dashboard, which I think is how ODC will be planning on using a lot of this going forward. Thanks, Ian. So if we look at that, that's a sample of Liv's housing stock. And you just see some of the differences. So the property on the right is fairly typical of a block of flats there, residents, where it's backed onto a road. There's very little greening, as opposed to the one on the left, where there is a certain amount of communal area around that. And what Liv were able to do here was to enhance that sort of greening area there to maximize the mitigation effect and to start to plan in areas on properties like the right. And in fact, what they ended up doing was using our data to prioritize in terms of retrofit the ones who actually came out with the red scores. And that financially had made a very big difference. So Ian, thanks.
Yep.
That was the value proposition. So they expected to see 100 times return on investment, purely because it enabled Liv to actually say, out of our retrofit budget that we planned for the next 5-10 years, we can prioritize the very specific properties where we know the area or the property is most vulnerable to this heat stress. So it enabled them to make a more informed decision on their immediate spend and to planning the finance for that. Thanks, Ian. Why should you use the data? I won't go through it all, but there's a I would say here, resilience, resident safety. You're protecting against some extreme conditions now. These climate perils are very real. They're here now. We can start thinking about 15 years out, but if we carry on having record summers like we've just had, it's very much here and now. Regulatory, I believe that the social housing regulator is paying attention to this type of data. They're producing yet another sort of score in terms of community. So it's what you're going to be doing to your residents will be of concern. The whole thing then around insurance and managing the asset, investment planning, very crucial. Community, if you can do more in terms of greening, we know that it's an association with mental health, and it's about doing good in terms of stewardship. Differentiation and reputations, you want to be ahead of the game, I would say. In terms of housing associations, you want a good reputation that you do good for your residents and you maintain your sort of asset stock. Thank you.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thanks, Steve. That's really good. A lot of again, a lot of data sets that kind of look at how you can identify risk within assets. That's a really good run through. Thank you. So again, just to kind of summarise from a ODC GIS perspective. So Fairhive invested in the heat risk data. They want to identify all the properties that were at risk from the heat and overheating in the future. Their goal was to proactively plan a retrofit program focusing on the properties that they need to invest in. So say they use the heat view data along with land registry. ODC provided them with the spatial analysis layers that they placed onto the GIS, as well as kind of a CSV file that showed them where the properties were in a tabular format. And then Fairhive have used that to strategically plan and prioritise retrofit efforts, ensuring that they focus resources on the properties where they have the greatest impact. So this proactive approach helps them to prepare for future climate change challenges and improve living conditions for their residents as well. Okay, so again, feel free to